But the waste isolation pilot plant has not been without issues. A 2014 radiation leak forced an expensive, nearly 3-year closure, delayed the federal government's cleanup program, and prompted policy changes at national laboratories and defense-related sites across the U.S. More recently, the U.S. Department of Energy said it would investigate reports that workers may have been exposed last year to hazardous chemicals. If it weren't for the waste isolation pilot plant, many containers of low-level waste would be sitting outside, exposed to the weather and susceptible to natural disasters, said J.R. Strobel, head of business operations at the Department of Energy's Carlsbad field office, which oversees the contractor that operates the repository. The whole purpose of WIPP is to isolate this long-lived radioactive, hazardous waste from the accessible environment, from people and the things people need in order to live life on Earth, he told the Associated Press. For critics, that success is checkered at best since the repository is far from fulfilling its mission. It's 80% through its lifetime, and it has disposed of less than 40% of the waste and has cost more than twice as much as it was supposed to, said Don Hancock with the watchdog group Southwest Research and Information Center. How great of a success is that? The repository was carved out of an ancient salt formation about a half-mile, 0.8 kilometer, below the surface, with the idea that the shifting salt would eventually entomb the radioactive waste. It was the National Academy of Sciences in the 1950s that first recommended disposing of atomic waste in deep geologic formations. Scientists began taking a hard look at the New Mexico site about 2 decades later. It was exciting to be working on what was then going to be the world's first deep geologic repository for that class of waste, said Peter Swift, a senior scientist at Sandia National Laboratories. Nothing that radioactive had been put that deep underground before. And that's still true 20 years later. But the wild card in whether the repository is ultimately deemed a success will be the human factor. After all, missteps by management were blamed for the 2014 radiation release. Hancock and some former elected leaders involved in early discussions about the facility worry about the subterranean landfill becoming a dumping ground for high-level waste or commercial nuclear waste. But it would take an act of Congress to expand the repository's mission, and getting consent from New Mexico's delegates would be a tall order since the federal government still has no long-term plan for dealing with such waste. Nevada's proposed Yucca Mountain project is mothballed, and no other permanent disposal proposals are on the table. Tony Anaya, who served as New Mexico governor in the 1980s, remembers the heated debates about bringing more radioactive waste to the state. He said there were concerns about safety, but the promise of jobs was attractive. Some also argued New Mexico had a moral obligation given its legacy of uranium mining and its role in the development of the atomic bomb. Another former governor, Bill Richardson, was on both sides of the tug-of-war, first as a young Democratic congressman who wanted to impose environmental standards and keep 18-wheelers loaded with waste from passing through the heart of Santa Fe. Then, he became U.S. Energy Secretary during the Clinton administration and pressured the state to clear the way for the repository to open. For New Mexico, we've done our share of storing waste, and we've done it safely and effectively, Richardson said. It's provided jobs, but I just think the future of the state is not nuclear. Southeastern New Mexico's ties to nuclear run deep and will continue for at least the next 30 years under the plans being charted now. Robust state regulation will be key in ensuring responsible management going forward, said Hancock, with the watchdog group. The problem, he said, is that besides the Cold War-era waste that has yet to be dealt with, the federal government and nuclear power plants keep generating more.